Hey everyone, and welcome to Wednesday DEVO for July 29, 2020. I'd like to share with you today from Acts 21, verses 17 through 40. I'm not going to read the entire passage, but several of the verses so that you get the idea. Beginning in verse 17, and oh, by the way, I'm reading from the Passion Translation. If you're not familiar with that, you can look it up at BibleGateway.com, and you can find that the Passion Translation is one of your choices there. So, Acts 21, verse 17. When we finally arrived in Jerusalem, the believers welcomed us with delight. The next day, Paul and our team had a meeting with James and all of the elders of the Jerusalem church. After greeting everyone, Paul explained in detail what God had accomplished through his ministry among the non-Jewish people. When they heard Paul's report, they praised God, and they said to him, "You should know, brother, that there are tens of thousands of Jews who have also embraced the faith and are passionately keeping the law of Moses. But they've heard a rumor that you've been instructing the Jews everywhere to abandon Moses by telling them that they don't need to circumcise their children or keep our Jewish customs. They will certainly hear that you've come to Jerusalem. So what is the proper way to proceed? We urge you to follow our suggestion." And then it goes on through the next few verses to point out and to instruct Paul to join 4 other men who are going to be going through a purification ceremony. So Paul joins them, and this purification ceremony is going to last for 7 days. I'll pick it up again in verse 27. When the 7-day period was almost over, a number of Jews from western Turkey who had seen him in the temple court stirred up the whole crowd against him. Seizing him, that's Paul, they shouted, "Men of Israel, help us. This is the man who teaches everywhere what is contrary to our nation, our law, and this temple. And not only that, but now he brings these non-Jewish men with him into the inner courts of our temple. They have made this sacred place ritually unclean." For Trophimus, an Ephesian, had been seen previously with him, and they assumed that he had entered the inner courts with Paul. Verse 30. This ignited a huge riot in the city as all the people came together to seize Paul and drag him out into the temple courts, closing the gates behind him. But as they were about to kill Paul, the news reached the commander of the Roman garrison that the entire city was in an uproar. He immediately ran out to the crowd with a large number of his officers and soldiers. When the crowd saw them, they stopped beating Paul. The commander arrested him and ordered that he be bound with 2 chains. He then asked, "Who is he and what has he done wrong?" Some of the crowd shouted one thing and others something else, just adding to the confusion. Since the commander was unable to get to the truth about this disturbance, he ordered that Paul be brought back to their headquarters. When they reached the steps heading from the garrison, from the fortress rather, they had to protect Paul and keep him up because of the mob of violence that was following them. And everyone was screaming, "Away with this man! Kill him!" Verse 37. As Paul was being led to the entrance of the compound, he said to the commander in Greek, "May I have a word with you?" The commander replied, "So you know Greek, do you? Aren't you that Egyptian fanatic who started a rebellion some time ago and led 4,000 assassins out into the wilderness?" Paul answered, "I am in fact a Jew from Tarsus in Cilicia, a well-known city of southern Turkey where I was born. I beg you, sir, please give me a moment to speak to these people." When the commander gave permission to Paul, Paul stood up on the steps and gestured with his hands for all the people to listen. When the crowd was quiet, Paul addressed them in Aramaic. And then he went on to preach a very important sermon. But the point is this, and I use the words of Bishop Emeritus Roger Haskins at this point as he sums this passage up for us. And he says, "Tell the story of Jesus' ministry tour is over. The sounds of their voices humming on the road again are silent. Dusty feet are washed. Weary backs sleep in comfort, hot meals are savored, home, sweet home. This lasts for a little while, at least, until they are unceremoniously dragged out of the church, an angry mob, incited by jealous religious authorities, so angry they begin to beat Paul, really wanting to kill Paul. Soldiers rush in to protect. The mob closes in. Soldiers literally lift Paul to their shoulders to carry him out of harm's way beyond the reach of the mob. The crowd follows, shouting death threats to Paul. Just before leaving the chaos of the church building and entering the sanctuary of the fortress, Paul asks the commanding officer if he, that's Paul, might speak to the angry mob that follows. The commander agrees, and Paul begins to speak. So what are the lessons that we learn from this? First of all, you will be misunderstood. In this life, in this world, especially if you live a life for Christ and follow the plan that He has for your life, you're going to be misunderstood. But what we should do is this: live the Jesus story anyway. Also, you will be mistreated. What should we do? Love like Jesus anyway. Lesson number 3, good days and times of blessing will always be interrupted. What are we to do? Trust our God of unfailing love anyway. You see the theme here? No matter what happens, no matter what our circumstances are, no matter what interruptions come into our life, no matter how we're misunderstood, how we're mistreated, whatever people are saying about us or to us or doing with us and to us, we're to love Jesus, we're to live Jesus, and we're to tell the story of Jesus anyway, because we serve a God of unfailing love who is ultimately in control of all things. Let's trust God and let's follow Jesus. And with that I say, amen.